Welcome to Semiconductor News Decoded. I'm Ty, with 31 years inside the semiconductor industry, bringing you the real view from the factory floor. Today's topic, SpaceX's ambitious plans for a massive semiconductor facility called Terafab in rural Texas, and the growing friction it's causing with local residents. Billions of dollars, thousands of jobs, and a community asking, why wasn't anyone talking to us first? As always, I'll explain everything in the most simplified way possible. Even a middle schooler should be able to follow along. If you're a specialist watching, some parts may feel oversimplified, but I'd like to prioritize giving everyone the big picture first. Think of it like a giant food processing plant suddenly appearing in a quiet farming town. So sit back and enjoy. Here's an analogy to get us started. Imagine you live in a peaceful rural farming town. One day, a large notice goes up on the bulletin board. We're building a massive food processing plant here. We'll create 1,800 jobs and invest $55 billion. That's essentially the situation unfolding in Grimes County, Texas right now. Your first reaction might be, more jobs. That sounds great. But when you stop and think, the questions pile up fast. How much water will this plant use every single day? Where does the wastewater go? If dozens of huge delivery trucks start rolling through our roads, what happens to our streets? And there's another issue. Nobody can actually verify whether those numbers on the notice, 1,800 jobs and $55 billion, are written into any legally binding contract. They say it, sure, but are they actually obligated to deliver? That nagging uncertainty doesn't go away. When residents push back in situations like this, they're usually not against the facility itself. They're upset about the lack of explanation. Whether it's a food plant or any other large industrial facility, most people can accept a big new neighbor if they get a clear, honest explanation of what's coming. The moment that explanation is missing, trust collapses fast. And here's the thing. This exact pattern has played out at large industrial sites all over the world. Capability and capital alone aren't enough. If you fail to build trust with the local community, you can't build the factory. Now, let's leave the analogy behind and look at how this is actually unfolding in the real semiconductor industry. Let me summarize the food factory analogy stance. Great promises on paper, real questions about water, waste, traffic, and accountability, and residents left in the dark. That dynamic maps almost perfectly onto what's happening in Grimes County, Texas. The main story is Terafab, a semiconductor manufacturing facility planned by SpaceX in partnership with Tesla and Intel on a rural site in central Texas. And honestly, my current read on this Terafab situation is almost exactly the same as this food factory story. The scale of investment is extraordinary, reportedly over $55 billion, potentially reaching $119 billion in later phases. That's roughly 19 trillion yen. The goals are equally ambitious: chips for AI data centers, autonomous robotaxis, and humanoid robots. But the relationship with the surrounding community? Still very much a work in progress. The stated purpose of Terafab is to manufacture chips for AI data centers, autonomous robotaxi systems, and humanoid robots. All of these are fast-growing markets. For the SpaceX group, bringing chip production in-house gives them a powerful strategic advantage: direct control over the supply chain for their most critical technology. Local residents have raised four main concerns. First, the sheer scale of the facility feels out of place for a rural community. Second, environmental impact: water consumption, wastewater discharge, and chemical handling. Third, a dramatic increase in heavy vehicle traffic. Fourth, insufficient public disclosure and transparency about what exactly is being built and how it will operate. Semiconductor factories tend to have a reputation for being clean and quiet. But the reality from the factory floor is quite different. These facilities consume enormous volumes of ultrapure water, use large quantities of hazardous chemicals like hydrofluoric acid, and require substantial wastewater treatment infrastructure. In my 31 years of experience, I've seen firsthand just how critical community communication is when siting a fab in a rural area. One issue residents have particularly zeroed in on is the gap between the announced figures and what's actually written in the contracts. Numbers like 1,800 jobs and $55 billion in investment have been publicized, but how legally binding those commitments actually are has not been made transparent to the public. On the tax side, Grimes County has already finalized an agreement giving the SpaceX Group a 100% property tax exemption from 2027 through 2036, with further long-term relief beyond that. From the residents' perspective, this reads as, we're giving them our tax dollars to attract them, and in return, we're getting vague answers on jobs, the environment, and basic communication. Here, I'd like to share my personal read on this situation. Companies under the Elon Musk umbrella have a documented history of friction with environmental regulators and local communities in various past projects. Because of that track record, some residents may be approaching Terafab with a higher than average level of skepticism. That said, this is purely my own interpretation. I want to be clear that the residents themselves have not made that specific claim in any of the reporting I've reviewed. This kind of tension isn't unique to Terafab. When TSMC, the world's largest contract chipmaker, began building its Arizona fab, early reports documented cultural friction with local workers and real difficulties in finding qualified local labor. Attracting a large-scale semiconductor fab to a new region is almost never a smooth process, anywhere in the world. What matters most now is how SpaceX responds. John Federspiel of Starlink has emphasized the company's commitment to sustainability, local economic contribution, and the intent to hire 1,800 workers from the local community. But the questions residents most want answered, exact water usage volumes, wastewater treatment specifics, chemical management protocols, still haven't been addressed with concrete numbers. Answering those questions is the key to rebuilding trust. History is full of fab construction projects that failed because they lost the community along the way. But there are also fabs around the world that have built lasting, positive relationships with their neighbors through transparent communication, local hiring programs, and education partnerships. Which path Terafab takes will depend entirely on what SpaceX chooses to do from here. This situation also points to a broader risk. The surging demand for AI semiconductors is pushing infrastructure build-out to move faster than community consent can keep pace. Having strong demand is not a justification for skipping local buy-in. Rushing a factory into place without genuine resident agreement carries the real risk of ultimately delaying the entire project even further down the road. Let me pull it all together. SpaceX is planning a massive semiconductor facility called Terafab in rural Texas. Over $55 billion in investment, a joint venture with Tesla and Intel, targeting in-house chip production for AI, robotaxis, and humanoid robots. Local residents are pushing back over environmental impact, traffic concerns, lack of transparency, and uncertainty about whether the announced commitments are legally enforceable. Residents who saw their county's tax dollars used to attract the project are understandably frustrated by the absence of clear answers. And this mirrors patterns we've seen before. TSMC Arizona and other large-scale fab projects have navigated the same challenges. Here's the bottom line. This story isn't really about SpaceX being a bad actor. It's about a universal challenge in semiconductor manufacturing. Even the most well-funded, technically capable companies cannot move forward without earning the trust of the communities around them. Accountability and open dialogue are not optional extras. They're foundational infrastructure. As AI demand surges and fab construction accelerates globally, the ability to balance speed with genuine local consent will define who actually succeeds. I'll be watching closely to see how SpaceX navigates this one. That's all for today. I'll keep bringing you semiconductor news and analysis, so if you found this useful, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. This has been Ty on Semiconductor News Decoded.